A tunnel, a bright light, an out-of-body experience. We're told death is the end. But what about people who came back from the brink? All around the world, people report near-death experiences. Strange phenomena, divine beings, miraculous stories of the impossible. Back from certain death. And decades of scientific research into it all. What's so big that it could be the breakthrough of an age? How are consciousness, the brain, and the soul intertwined? Perhaps the great beyond is closer than we think. It's time to get into the undisputable patterns, capturing the attention of scientists, doctors, atheists, priests, moms, and pops. This is bigger than we ever could have imagined. Near-Death Experiences Part 1. Amazing Stories of the Afterlife.
Dr. Sama Mumbwe of the University of Zambia looked at NDEs in Africa, Japan, East India, America, England, and Micronesia. Quote, in one case in Africa, after being attacked by a lioness protecting her cubs, a 60-year-old truck driver reported that a highway opened up for him, going endlessly into the sky, surrounded by stars. When he tried to go on to the highway, the stars blocked his way, and he stood there until the highway and stars disappeared.
In another case, an 85-year-old stroke survivor reported,
I felt I was in a big calabash with a big opening, but somehow I couldn't get out of it. Then a voice from somewhere said to me, "Be brave, take my hand and come out. It is not yet your time to go."
Are these just cases of religion and culture influencing people? Is that why we all have similar NDEs? Well, that wouldn't explain studies showing that very young children have NDEs with the same elements as older children and adults. I mean, young children don't even know what an NDE is or have exposure to heavier concepts like deep philosophy and religion.
seriously. In a study of 26 children under 5, with the average being 3.6 years old, their answers to questions about their near-death experiences didn't differ significantly at all from children over 6 or grown-ups. Just think about how little a 3-year-old is. So that's interesting because the scientists expected that the content of a young child's NDE will be limited to their vocabulary.
But the age ended up not determining the complexity of the NDE content. Even children too little to put experiences into words later reported very complex experiences. The researchers concluded that age doesn't seem in any way to affect the content of NDEs.
But what kinds of stories do they report? One 5-year-old Paul had an NDE while he was hit by a passing van as he crossed the street. He was running home to get his school uniform. He said,
I jumped from the Jeep and ran to cross the road to reach home first. What I remember is something coming beside me. Later I knew it was a van. What I really remember is just taking 1 or 2 steps into the road before something happened.
Paul continued,
I felt like a hydrogen balloon floating in the air. I was going upward. I slowly opened my eyes and I saw my body lying on the roadside. I got really frightened. I felt paralyzed and I was going upward, but I felt someone was carrying me very lovingly, an unconditional love. I tried to move my body and turn my eyes upward to see who was carrying me. What I saw was Mother Mary. She wore a blue and pink dress with a crown. I felt very comfortable in her hands.
you know, children's stories like this are like so much more believable because it's like, it's just...
Totally.
Yeah, you know, it's like they're not making this stuff up.
And they're describing Mother Mary with like kind of not really having a concept of who they
No,
are.
that's crazy about it.
Totally.
Another young child, Katie, had an NDE when she was 3 years old and choked on a cashew. Her firefighter grandfather couldn't revive her after she passed out and pronounced her dead. But Katie was watching the whole thing from outside her body. She said when she died, she watched her grandfather work on her. but her body was no interest to her. Instead, she moved out of the room toward a presence she felt in the living room. Now listen to this.
I went towards his presence, which was within a brilliant, sunlit, bright space. Not a tunnel, but an area. The presence was unbelievable peace, love, acceptance, calm, and joy. The presence enveloped me, and my joy was indescribable. As I write this, I am brought back to this emotion, and it delights me still. The feeling is spectacular. I did not experience his presence as God. I was too young to understand the concept, but I did experience his presence as that which made me. I knew, without a doubt, that I was a made creature, a being that owed its existence to this presence.
Now, she doesn't remember re-entering her body, but when she woke up the next day, she knew for sure that there was life after death and that she was a created being. And since she was 3 years old, this thought wasn't expressed as rational knowledge, but by pestering her mother with question after question, like, who made me? What is eternity? And what is God?
It's like a 3-year-old being like, Mommy, what's eternity? It's a complicated question.
I was like asking my mom those questions though when I was really young.
Ben and Katie. Katie said as an adult when she recalled the experience, it was more real than anything she ever experienced in her life. She remembered not just the events, but the emotion. It moved her so deeply and made her ask all sorts of questions that she dedicated her life to looking for answers. She studied philosophy, religion, and started working toward a doctorate in theology. And the interesting thing is that this kind of transformative experience is common in NDEs.
Yeah, what's interesting is that people have similar experiences. But a weird thing they found is that NDEers also tend to use the same kinds of words to describe their NDEs. One study looked at these repeating linguistic factors specifically.
Wow. People used, quote, unconventional words, directly referencing esoteric and transpersonal types of content like angel, church, God, tunnel, heaven, demon, Christ, and Lord. There were also, quote, conventional words about environment or mundane things like wake, breathe, doctor, nurse, familiar, accident, pain, and night.
And then there were, quote, ambiguous words that were tied to emotions or perceptions. These could be open to interpretation based on context. So words like lights, beautiful, bright, warm, love, voice, music, darkness, comfortable, pleasant, feelings, float, soft, appear, tremendous, form, wonder, dream, sensation, and energy.
But how does this really tell us anything? Well, in this analysis, they also looked at how near-death experiences are classified. There's actually an official NDE scale used around the world to determine if someone had a near-death experience.
The scale looks at cognitive, affective, paranormal, and transcendental components of people's NDE reports and scores each point. If at the end you score 7 or more points on the official Grayson NDE scale, then it's considered by science to be a legitimate NDE.
We can't always box in people's experiences by what science limits, right? But in this case, we can look at why that scale looks at each of those types of experiences in the first place. It's actually because those are the same common features of NDEs that people have been experiencing all over the world basically forever.
So what's cool is that they started tracking those common experiences to start looking for patterns. Like what patterns, you may ask? Well, what do you think of when you hear about near-death experiences, Rob?
Probably an out-of-body experience. Maybe someone was in an accident and they floated out of their bodies and were really light and comfortable, but then got pulled back in because it wasn't their time.
Right, and your answer represents a few different common types of NDEs, leaving the body being light, feeling comfortable or free of pain like Annabelle Bean was, and knowing that it's not your time. But did you also know there are other common NDE patterns?
Yeah, features like 1, people's minds functioning more clearly or thinking more quickly than normal. 2, being drawn into a tunnel or darkness. 3, seeing a brilliant light like at the end of a tunnel. And 4, ultimate peace, well-being, and unconditional love.
Yeah. There's also 5, feeling like you have access to unlimited knowledge. 6, seeing future or faraway events. 7, meeting deceased loved ones or divine beings. 8, feeling time moving differently. 9, being in another realm, heaven or hell even. 10, hearing, seeing, smelling, and sensing vividly. 11, having a life review or panoramic memory. There are so much more.
Like 12, seeing President Trump after you die. Just kidding. Yeah, some of the weirdest common reports get into deathbed visions, paranormal experiences, and electromagnetic phenomena. We'll get into more of the weirdest NDE features later, so don't worry.
So actually, Rob and I have a personal friend named Chris Holhouse who sadly passed away a couple years ago, but he had a heart murmur and went into the hospital, and when they tried to remove, they found fluid in his lungs, they tried to remove it, and this like black mass went over his heart and stopped his heart. I guess the doctor said he was dead for about 10 minutes, almost 10 minutes. It was completely flatlined, everything.
Well, and if you know anything about, dying, that's...
Yeah.
You don't come back from that.
No, not really. And then all of a sudden his heart started beating.
On its own.
On its own.
And you'd be brain dead if that happened to you,
completely.
Right? But he wasn't.
Yeah, and the neurologists came in. I don't know if you were there during that process.
I was there.
You came. We were like coming and going because we were all seeing him. I was there in the beginning, and the doctors came in and they literally said, even if he wakes up, he's going to be completely brain dead. And
he wasn't.
2 days later, I had a dream where he woke up and he was telling me, I'm coming back. And so I told his family and everything else. I was like, I'm having these dreams about him. So we were all there for 3 months straight. Just, and that's like, you came during that process, and we were just like meditating, sending like the most positive energy we can towards him. And I just knew in my heart, I'm like, he's going to wake up through this. And he started moving his hands first, and then he actually opened his eyes. And then about a week later,
he was a medical miracle.
He started talking to us. Yeah. And it was the neurologists came in, and actually it was I think it was a kidney doctor that came in and was like, you guys don't understand. Like, you are driving the neurologists crazy right now. Like they like everything that they know has just been thrown out the window, because of this specific case. And it was amazing. And he lived for 2 years. He lost some motor functions and stuff, but the cancer was like kind of coming back. But but he lived 2 years after that in a wheelchair, and he was fully awake. And it was just amazing, totally amazing. So I think so many of us even there's even more people on our team that have this, but they were too shy to talk about it.
It's true.
Maybe later.
Another time.
Yeah. Okay.
So clearly, I personally think that looking into this NDE stuff is just interesting. But why do we really care about NDEs? For spiritual and religious people, it might reaffirm our faith, but for scientists, it actually opens up the door to a whole new world never before acknowledged. Brian Miller may have done that to the hospital staff in Beechwood, Ohio, when he was 41, a week after his mother-in-law passed away. He was back at work when he felt a horrible chest pain. He was having a heart attack. His main artery was entirely blocked. They call this kind of heart condition the widowmaker. They rushed Brian into surgery, but then he started experiencing ventricular fibrillation. Basically, his nurse said his heart rate turned into a scribble.
Yeah. Brian's heart wasn't pumping or doing anything for 45 minutes, so his brain had no oxygen, and that's when he had the NDE. He started walking towards the light on a heavenly path lined with flowers. And then he saw his mother-in-law, Kay. Listen to Brian tell it himself.
She was the most beautiful thing when I seen her. It was like the first day I met her, and looked so happy. She grabbed a hold of my arm and she told me, it's not your time. You don't need to be here. We need to take you back. You got things to go home and do.
And after what felt like 15 minutes,
her husband Jack was back there waving at me, giving me a smile. And she just told me to go home. It walked me back.
Now the doctors were shocking Brian's chest, and it still wasn't working by the 4th shock.
Then out of nowhere, his nurse said that he got his pulse back.
Just like our friend Chris,
Yeah.
that happened, yeah.
He had a normal heartbeat and later was walking, talking, and laughing. The nurse said that it was really amazing, and all Brian had to say afterwards was that his entire outlook on life and death had changed. He said there's no reason to be sad, there's an afterlife, and people need to believe in it. He also said that love is all that matters. That's amazing.
And it's so true. It really is. Social and medical sciences are constantly looking to explain the brain, the mind, and consciousness. Sometimes the accepted standards, research, and questions in each of those fields actually compete with each other. So that's a problem, and we can't advance our understanding of the whole thing very much when it's so segmented.
But if near-death experiences bridged those gaps like they started seeing, then research into it could entirely change our science. Remember the study of linguistic patterns of NDE accounts? They found that the type of brain activity necessary for complex conscious experience typically reported in NDEs is absent in both cardiac arrest and general anesthesia, conditions under which NDEs commonly occur. Likewise, the accounts typically involved psychological conditions that would seem to undermine complex conscious experience.
What does that mean? Well, let's break it down. So your heart has stopped and you're under anesthesia, but you have an NDE and report something you could never have known or experienced because you were dead or at death's door.
These researchers found that the type of brain activity necessary for complex conscious experience is assumed to be abolished during the psychological conditions in which NDEs are commonly reported. So doesn't that throw what we know or think we know about the brain, cognition, and consciousness out the window?
Yeah, basically they say this is all remarkable and isn't explainable by modern theories of brain physiology. So finally, these experiences are validated in science because there are too many of them and they share too many commonalities to ignore. But then that raises the most mysterious of questions. Why do people have NDEs at all?
What causes NDEs? Scientists started thinking that people's mental boundaries aren't set like they thought. Neuroplasticity is the idea that our brains can change their networks and pathways to connect in different ways. So if the boundaries aren't set, the different parts might be more connected than they think. This is a start to them understanding how we might experience things like NDEs when our bodies would indicate we're dead.
However, the part they usually miss is that there's an energetic or consciousness component that goes far beyond just our physical brains sitting in our heads. Consciousness isn't limited to brain waves, and they're just starting to figure that out.
So if the brain isn't necessarily the answer to why people have NDEs, what does cause them? Well, there are different explanations. Some believe it shows proof of people's consciousness surviving after death, showing that our souls, or whatever you prefer to call them, don't really die. So maybe it's ourselves, quote, causing the NDEs.
Some believe divine beings cause near-death experiences or that NDEs are a part of some people's past to experience. And some NDErs themselves reported that it's indicative of larger cosmic changes in energy that aren't really unique to them.
Then again, there are many different circumstances under which people might experience NDEs. Do these circumstances themselves cause them? There are traumatic events like illness, surgery, or childbirth, accidents, drugs, or medications, head injuries, and cardiac arrest. But there are also extreme fear events and spontaneous NDEs during full consciousness. As one study showed, severe brain damage and complete loss of vital signs are not prereqs for NDEs. It's just those cases that get all the attention and serve as more legitimate proof to the more scientific-minded.
Okay, everybody, it's time to get into some of the weird stuff. One thing we found is that NDEs take place among those who are blind, and their NDEs include visual experiences. One woman, Vicky, was blind almost from birth. When she was 22, she was in a car accident and had such severe head injuries and trauma that she was still recovering a year later.
Vicky had an out-of-body experience in the emergency room. She floated above her body as the doctors worked to save her. She said,
I knew it was me. I was pretty thin then. I was quite tall and thin at that point, and I recognized at first that it was a body, but I didn't even know that it was mine initially. Then I perceived that I was up on the ceiling and I thought, well, that's kind of weird. What am I doing up here? I thought, well, this must be me. Am I dead? I just briefly saw this body and I knew it was mine because I wasn't in mine.
She exactly described what her wedding ring looked like with orange blossoms on the corners. She said she was pulled through a tunnel and emerged in a grassy place with people of light. The coolest thing she said, though, was that it was the only time she could ever relate to seeing and to what light was because she experienced it during an NDE.
It's interesting that when blind people acquire sight after surgeries, it usually takes them time to adjust to vision or make sense of certain aspects of sight. But Vicky understood right away. So NDEs don't seem to just be physical experiences as much as something beyond.
Another blind NDEer said, "Everything was very bright and sharp. I am legally blind without my glasses, but the nurse took my glasses before they took me to the delivery room, but I could see clearly what the doctor was doing." And other blind NDEers reported 360-degree sight, perfect vision, and seeing, sensing, and feeling on another plane.
One of them said it was like trying to explain the colors of a rainbow to a blind person. So basically, it's pretty hard to describe your vision in an NDE when you're normally blind, but they did experience it to the amazement of scientists.
There are other amazing NDE experiences too, like the British woman who suddenly spoke French after her near-death experience. She was crossing the road in the rain when a white van hit her. She hit the side of her head and rolled under a parked car.
She said she was in a grade 3 coma, the deepest one you can be in but still be alive. And when she woke up, she couldn't remember anything from a year before the accident. She wouldn't be able to remember what happened for the next 4 years after the accident either, but the weirdest part was that the first words she spoke were French.
She would reply to friends and doctors in French very fluently. She had taken German and French in school 30 years earlier, but why did she speak it in her semi-conscious state? Doctors decided to encourage her to speak English because, after all, she was English, but for 2 weeks she was stuck in French. She had never had a desire to visit France or anything before.
Before she was fully conscious, friends would play her music from the opera she had directed. Her heart rate would race during the music and go back to normal afterwards. And after she woke up, people would keep track of when she said English words or smiled.
Her dad started singing nursery rhymes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's when she finally replied in English, "Once I caught a fish alive."
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I caught a fish alive.
They were relieved her language was back.
For those of you not following, that's a nursery rhyme in Great Britain.
I actually never heard of that one before, so.
So that's all kinds of weird and spectacular, but I think it's time we get into the strangest phenomenon we found related to people actually meeting other beings during their NDEs. Many people have reported seeing other dimensions or divine figures, but it's super weird that a common type of NDE is for people to actually see Elvis.
I've never even heard of this before. Elvis' so-called after-death communications have been as legendary as his performances.
The band was jumping and the joint began to swing. You should have heard the knocked out jailbird sing, let it rock. Everybody let it rock. Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Spider Murphy played his in a saxophone. Little Joe was blowing on the slide trombone. Crash, boom, bang. The whole rhythm section was a purple gang, let it rock.
He has reportedly greeted people into heaven and comforted them. I've never heard of this. This is so fascinating. It's so common that there's an entire book on it called Elvis Afterlife. And in Dr. Melvin Morse's book, Transformed by the Light, he documented an Elvis NDE story from a 45-year-old Midwestern teacher.
I entered into a dark tunnel, and suddenly I was in a place filled up with love and a beautiful bright light. The place seemed holy. My father, who had died 2 years earlier, was there, as were my grandparents. Everyone was happy to see me, but my father told me it was not my time and I would be going back. Just as I turned to go, I caught sight of Elvis. He was standing in this place of intense bright light. He just came over to me, took my hand and said, "Hi, Bev. Do you remember me?"
And probably it was more like this. Hi, Bev. Do you remember me?
Of course, some people believe that Elvis faked his death and his name isn't even an anagram of lives. But whether that's true or not, some have reported seeing people in other dimensions who haven't died yet during their NDEs. Some believe that people have earthly selves and also ascended selves or selves on other planes. Whatever the reason, it seems it doesn't have to be someone dead who NDEers see.
But why Elvis?
I don't know.
A lot of people reported seeing Jesus, Buddha, grandparents, favorite pets, or divine-looking beings. Perhaps different people have different preferences or need to experience different things at these moments. Many people find their near-death experience to be life-changing after the fact.
That's for sure. We'll actually be getting into personal stories of celebrities who have had these life-changing NDEs in part 2 of this series.
And we'll also talk about the things nobody really hears about near-death experiences, like supernormal abilities people have manifested, as well as all sorts of after effects of NDEs. Near-death experiences go way beyond consciousness simply floating out of the body, not dying and floating back in.
Yeah, scientists have been cataloging how near-death experiencers actually cause things in their environment to behave differently. And the environment causes reaction in the NDEers as well. This is a rabbit hole you don't want to miss going down with us.
It's about time someone really broke down what's going on and merged the spiritual with the scientific. That's what Edge of Wonder is here for. So thanks for being on this wild journey with us into the mysterious beyond.
And thank you for the support. We truly could not do it without you. So with that, until next time, we'll see you out
on the edge
of Elvis.
Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber. Hey everyone, did you like this episode? Well, let us know in the comments. We love that you're always brutally honest. If you want to see more videos, make sure to subscribe to this channel, turn on your notifications, like this video, and if you want to watch even more awesome content, you can subscribe to rise.tv, where we have a full catalog of shows on everything from ancient civilizations, mysteries, metaphysical phenomenon, and so much more. So we'll see you out on the edge.